Okay, hi. Welcome to the TERN Ecosystem Surveillance Annual Report webinar for 2020-2021. I'm Katie Irvine, I'm TERN Outreach Officer, and I'm speaking to you from Ghana land. If you have any questions of Ben during the seminar, can you please put them in the Q&A, and he will get to some of those questions at the end of the seminar. We're so pleased that you can join us, and Ben will give the seminar now. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hey, I really appreciate you all logging on. I think my screen's all good there now. Katie?
Yes, it's great.
Thanks for logging on wherever you are. I see some of our colleagues have joined us internationally, so I appreciate it. It may not be the most sensible, convenient time for you to join in, so I appreciate you doing that. What we wanted to do today is just reflect on, hang on, let me just get my slides happening here. For starters, we'll do an acknowledgement of country. So we're TERN acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians throughout Australia and New Zealand and all nations. We honour their profound connections with land, water and biodiversity and culture, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So today I'm here at home in Adelaide, so we're in Ghana land. Presenting because I've got a sick child at home, so excuse, hopefully we don't have any interruptions. But I'd encourage you all in the chat function down the bottom just to put your name and the country you're on at the moment. That would be really nice. We just wanted to do a few things in the presentation today. We wanted to reflect on the year that was 2020, and by all accounts it was kind of a dumpster fire. It was not the greatest year, and here in Australia we're really quite lucky in that the effects haven't been quite as profound on us as they have some of our international colleagues. So I hope you're all doing okay out there, and would love to hear from you. But nonetheless, it has provided some serious challenges on the way that we actually conduct our business. Katie alluded to the Q&A function, so if you have any questions for us at any time, just ping them into the Q&A. We won't stop the presentation to deal with them, but we'll absolutely deal with some of them at the end of the presentation and undertake to answer all of them. We can get back to you on an individual basis to deal with any of your questions. So keen to hear anything you're after more information on. I have to mention also that it's Sal's birthday today. This has been mentioned just a couple of times, so I had to slot that in there somewhere as well. So 2020 for us provided some serious challenges as to how we would conduct our business. And as I alluded to, I'm sure many of our international counterparts found it even more challenging, no doubt. But we had to deal with really rapid border closures. Australia's dealt with the COVID threat by regularly, rapidly shutting down state borders, etc. And we've had periods where we were shut down, periods where we were encouraged to work from home, etc. So that provided a big challenge with us doing fieldwork. So it's meant that in the last 12 months, we've done less fieldwork than we would have hoped. And many of the other activities that we would consider normal, you know, our training courses and our workshops that we regularly hold that many of you have been a part of, haven't been able to proceed as normal. And we've had to adapt to working from home at a pretty short notice, etc. And what I think that's done is that's changed the way we interact. And so one of the real motivations for me speaking to you today was to try and let you know what we have been doing and what we aspire to do in the next year or so, and increase some of that interaction where perhaps that's fell a little by the wayside with us dealing with a very changing world. Just a couple of slides for a reminder. So TERN's funded under NCRIS, the Research Infrastructure Program. So our role is to create and deliver research infrastructure to the ecological community globally. But it does mean that our focus is a little different from a traditional university, working within the university system, sometimes there's a challenge where people don't actually understand the real role of research infrastructure. So I just wanted to highlight that. And over the year, well, over many years, we've understood, and I think we've done a better job of understanding environmental monitoring and the different scales that operates, and the different kinds of questions that different forms of environmental monitoring will answer. And I'll refer to this publication later because I think this has really informed us quite a bit on how we do our business. So it means that we understand our monitoring strengths and work in areas to collaborate with many of our colleagues, many of you online, to work and synthesize across those scales to deal with the other components of environmental monitoring. So this is a diagram of the scales of monitoring, but it's also how we've mirrored TERN structure. So for the few of you that aren't familiar with this, TERN has a central coordination capability, which you can see at the right there, the left. It has 3 scales of monitoring. So it has continental scale or landscape monitoring, really addressing the where and when challenges of environmental change. It has regional scale monitoring that deals with what's changing, how much is it changing, what direction is that change. And it has local scale monitoring or process monitoring that deals with why is change occurring and how do we manipulate that change in a direction that we're happy with. And so those 3 data collection capabilities all work closely together. Many of you know that, many of you are involved with that, and then synthesize that data through a data and data synthesis capability to make it widely and freely available. It's worth noting here that the story about landscape monitoring, process monitoring is best told by others. So what I'll focus today on is what their surveillance team have been up to and how we're addressing those, what's changing and how much in direction of change kind of questions. We're a larger team, and I'll get later in the presentation, we'll discuss some of the new initiatives that have meant the team is growing. But it's too large a team now to deal with in a flat structure. So we have some sort of sub-teams that it helps to understand what they do, and just the way we manage business. The photo at the bottom is the team that caught up yesterday for an internal catch-up, first chance to catch up after the summer break there. And each of those capabilities we'll discuss just in a little more detail in the context of what their work looked like in 2022. So the core of what we do, of course, is about field operations, going out and collecting field data right across the continent. And here you can see our field team with our latest operational platform. We spare no expense in the equipment we provide them. But the last year, as I discussed, provided some challenges for them. So the field work for 2020 was very much abridged, and plans had to change at the very short notice. The photo at the top left there, you can see the team at Central Mount Stewart, only occurring because as they were approaching the Queensland border, it looked very likely that there was going to be a hard shutdown on the Queensland border, and indeed a few days later there was. And so Emrys and the team there were very flexible in adapting to that and rescuing a trip and doing some extra work there, which has meant we filled a pre-existing gap anyway, which is lovely. It involved the first trips in the Tanami, the first set of sites in the Tanami bioregion, the top right there. But it's also involved some collaboration with the Australian Mountain Research Facility to help co-locate some of our infrastructure with theirs. And personally, I found it really exciting that the first trip we did for the year was to revisit some of the very first AusPlots that were ever collected. I think they were plots 3 through 8. So it was really exciting to go back there and see the change that has occurred. And then subsequently, a month or so later, have a look at the data and see how that change was expressed in the data. We also started to turn our focus on areas where there was fire, and this will be a bit of a theme in the presentation. So there was a collaboration looking at burnt plots on Kangaroo Island. As you're aware, that was one of the areas significantly impacted by last summer's fire events. And we filled some key gaps in South Australia opportunistically, in that there were times in the field season we could work reasonably freely within the state boundaries, but couldn't go into state. Other activities that team worked on is we used it as an opportunity to catch up on many of our property reports. So one of the key things we do is when we go out to a property and collect a range of information, that's made accessible to you as researchers in the ways you're familiar with and we'll discuss later. But we also create sort of property reports which summarize the kinds of information we collect and how that's able to be used, and provide that to the landholders so that they're engaged, they have access to the information in a way that's relevant and useful to them, and become more engaged and supportive in the process. So the chance to have a team working from home that's normally in the field meant that we could catch up on some of this, make sure all our property reports are up to date. One of the other things we're able to do, and a colleague in Rome, Danilo, put us onto this many years ago, is we've been able to use a program called Collect Earth to assess change at our plots. And so what that's allowed us to do, we set this up with some collaborative help from the FAO in Rome, is to look at change in our plots. So over the period we've had our plots established, we can understand where cover has changed significantly from when we collected our initial baseline, and so prioritise sites or areas for recollection. But it's also meant that we've been able to attribute fires. So we'll go out there and we can tell that there was a fire sometime in the recent past. It's allowed us to attribute that by analysing the image archive to when that fire actually occurred, so that we can append that to our field data and have more accurate information on when the bushfires actually occurred. We used the opportunity to catch up in a whole lot of curation. Excuse me. And so there were times during the year where we weren't prevented from going to the office, but we were strongly encouraged to minimise the number of staff in the office. And so we used that time for a lot of people that were convenient to work from home, and those that needed to go into the office to primarily do a heap of curation on our samples were able to do so in a office and lab environment that was very, very sparse with people. There were only a few people in the office at a time. And so it did provide us the opportunity to catch up on many of those curatorial tasks. And you'll see on the right there's some of the brief stats on the number of samples we bring back. I'm sure many of you are aware of the huge range of samples that we provide to researchers, as well as just the core data we collect. We've seen increased data use over 2020 and sample use as well. Here's just a short example. There's been many, many others, far too long to present in a short presentation, but we've had soil samples used, we've had leaf tissue samples used, we've had some samples used in Germany, of all places, actually, for chenopod taxonomy. So we're starting to have the community understand the value of not only the data we collect, but the samples that go with that, and the added benefit of having those samples to be analysed after the fact. We've continued to engage volunteers, and you can see here over the past few years we've had a huge number of volunteers, and when you look at the hours contributed, amazing number of volunteer hours contributed to the program. Last year, of course, that was really truncated to not a whole lot of volunteer work because there were times we weren't allowed in the office, etc. But Really need to say a huge thank you to our volunteers. I'm sure some of them will be online. It's not possible to do what we do and provide you with the research infrastructure we do without the huge help of a great number of volunteers that believe and engage in the program and actually help deliver that in a voluntary way. Excuse me, let me just have a quick sip of coffee here. I think my 12-year-old disease vector might have shared his cold, so just excuse me struggling here a little. In a curation and management sense, again, we used the opportunity of a quieter year in the field and data coming in to deal with some maintenance kind of issues. So most of you will be aware that we collect most of our data on a purpose-made app, and so there's always tuning and tweaking of that. That's something that's ongoing. But what we did in the last year too is we moved over to new and simpler DGPS technology so that we can really accurately mark out our plot. That's critical to monitoring. But now, instead of collecting that as a separate process and struggling to feed that data in to our database in a completely separate way, we now have this device talk to our app and directly collect that really accurate spatial information into our app. And you see here a screen grab of how that works. So that's made it easier for our team to lay out the plots in the field. So that's a really big advantage, but it's made it easier and quicker for that data to flow too, so that we're able to get that spatial information into the hands of our users much quicker. Bit of a technical slide, but we've changed and improved the way we make data available to our users. And so we've improved our API, that sort of way that you can programmatically interact with our database, and worked with the TERN data team to do that. And also improved the way that we collect usage metrics so that we understand much better how and what our data is being used. And understanding that, having that information allows us to adapt what we're doing and appreciate how our data is being used. One of the things, and I struggled where to fit this in the presentation, is that our R&D team and our data team have worked really closely together to create a package called AusPlotsR. And AusPlotsR has existed in some form for 4 years, but the team in the sort of less busy time in the field utilised that to actually do a significant update on AusPlotsR. And that package that you use alongside of R has enabled us to get our raw data and information on our samples, etc., to our users in a particularly streamlined way, but also now enables a little bit of mapping functionality, some summarizations of our data so people can understand the data we collect, and some of that exploratory analysis is available to you in that package as well. So we anticipate that means that you'll be able to get your hands on the data you need quicker. You're able to make those sort of data discovery choices quicker and easier. And seemingly the statistics would bear that up. We're now, AusPlotsR is now used by almost 400 users. You'll note the graph only finishes in, it had a big update that was, I think, October or so last year. So you see a bit of a peak there, but the graph doesn't go beyond November. So even over the sort of traditional break from November through to now, we've seen close to another 90 or so users taken up. So we've served a huge number of requests, approaching almost a million sites worth of data that's been downloaded and used, and a huge number of data records as well. We've laid the groundwork for adapting our system there of how we collect data in the field and make it publicly available to the beginning of a project where we're working with Department for Environment federally to make that available much more widely for a much greater suite of protocols. So we'll touch on that a little later, but what that's meant is there's been a fair bit of foundational work over the latter part of last year to get the bits and pieces, the structure of that and the core infrastructure that we will then use to deliver our data infrastructure, the sort of IT infrastructure, if you like, in place and set up so that we can roll that project out over the coming couple of years. We've had some upgrade of equipment. The last large funding round, there was an injection of cash to help us with our core infrastructure. So that's allowed us to purchase a couple of really purpose-designed field vehicles, a couple of Land Cruisers like those in the photo. But the ideal sort of vehicle to do our work. And it's enabled us to kit them out appropriately so the field team can put their hands on the equipment they need when they need easily. But perhaps even more importantly, there is projected, by owning these vehicles over renting these vehicles, projected about $500,000 saving over a decade. So it was sort of the right financial decision as well. Really excitingly, well, the little building in the background there in this photo you can see is where our office block, for those who aren't familiar. Across the road, just immediately before Christmas, they cleared this space for us, and we're really excited because this will become a large storage shed with some controlled environment, etc. in it that will enable us to have a home for all our field equipment, which is currently in a shipping crate, but then a home for all of our samples in a controlled environment. All our traditional soil samples, our soil metagenomic samples and our vegetation samples will all be able to be housed in this facility. So hopefully if we do this presentation again 12 months time, I'll have some really exciting photos of that just being established and happening there. So we're really excited about that. And currently we are busting at the seams in the office, so having some space for storage will be really invaluable. And many of you are aware we have an R&D team. And sorry, I purposely call it an R&D team rather than a research team for a very important reason, is that their work is all very much focused on improving our products and services, or more efficient or novel ways of us to collect the information that researchers need. So it's certainly not blue sky research like is sort of traditional university domain, but very focused on enabling us to improve what we do. And so that team had some really notable outputs this year and some exciting opportunities happening for next year. The first that we've had published with the reference down the bottom is our rationale for the different types of monitoring we do within TERN's finally being published. And those of you that were involved in that will realise this has been a journey that's probably not far short of a decade. But that process has really helped us understand our niche, and it's helped us understand how we collaborate with our colleagues to provide holistic information on environmental change to the community. And the other one we're really excited about too was finally, again, after over a decade for this one, we published on the rationale of our method, the core method that we use and have implemented now over 800 times. As accepted for publication, published in Frontiers. And along with the information on why our spatial arrangement, etc., is there on the left, we also did a small analysis on how it was used. And there's some tables in there with 60 or so examples of how this infrastructure's led to subsequent research. So I encourage you to check that out if that's of interest. The team have conducted a big chunk of research around how we sample and dealing with gaps. And so there's been 4 components to that in various stages of preparation to deal with how has our sampling performed to date, where are the current gaps in environmental coverage, what's a resampling strategy, what makes sense there, and what's our capacity to detect change. So briefly, we looked at how we performed to date, and really quite excited to hear that the way we initially set things up has served us quite well. but Greg and the team have developed some much more robust ways in the future of assessing where's the sort of best bang for our buck, so to speak, where's the next sites that are going to provide us the most information about Australia. So improving the way we do that, and that's led to that's been used, and the last 150 or so plots have been located using that method. And you can see in the graphs, I haven't got them prepared here, I'm sorry, that our representativeness is increasing more sharply than it was previously. So that's a publication that's out there in Ecosphere. Looking at where our gaps in environmental coverage is being recently published in the Journal of Applied Ecology. And so you can see on the right, those areas were informed by the analysis, and you can see in the middle, the red areas suggesting they're most different to what we currently have. And you can see that the previous gap filling exercise based on this method has increased the representativeness of Australia. And so that's a process now that's set up to be iterative. So we can, every year we can use that to run the sites we've got and then help that to define where new sites go. But of course, we're not always putting out new sites, and indeed over time we're decreasingly so. We're more getting back to revisits. And so the team's well underway looking at of the plots we've got, which are the more important plots to revisit in a shorter period of time. And so that sort of optimization of which bits to revisit is happening, and it's sort of a watch this space. It's quite, it's in prep, but it's quite mature, so we'd expect that shortly, hopefully. Something we've moved to wherever possible and it makes sense, we preprint things. So as they're submitted, we will submit a preprint as well, and then also keep that updated as things go through the review process, etc. Bearing in mind the restrictions depending on which journal we're submitting to, etc. But we do try and make sure any of this information the team work on, you can get access to it as quickly as possible. We've really chuffed to have this out, and I'm sure Sam's sitting there looking at a computer nodding, because it's been a bit of a task, but over the last few years we've worked at assigning the photosynthetic pathways to the species we've collected in TERN plots. And so that has included a huge literature review component to assess what's known in the literature about those species, but then for a reasonable number of species, it's needed isotope analysis to be run to help inform which pathway those species use, and that data set's just been made public, and there's subsequently papers in review based on that will provide information on how and why that was collected, etc. Nicely, that data has already been used by the community to support some PhD students, and it's currently being used to investigate the distribution of C4 species across the country and the proportion of C3 and C4 at many of their monitoring plots. Excuse me. We've got an ongoing project that we're just getting a little more traction on late last year and beginning of this year to understand how useful eDNA collection is to us. So many of you will be aware that we collect sort of metagenomic samples, so samples that we can use for genetic analysis of the top 3 centimeters of soil. But we're trying to do a little bit of work around understanding the effort required to detect a representative picture of biodiversity in different ecotypes using that information. And so that's something that we would hope progresses significantly over the next year, but would be really key information on how useful that information will be and inform researchers on what they can expect out of using those samples. We've done some engagement. You can understand the challenge that last year provided for engagement, but there was some local training of some university students in our method. We have an exemplar plot just up the hill from our office. So we ran through some training with some of those teams. We got involved with the University of Adelaide Open Day, and we created an educational package for senior secondary students. And there's a significant pull for that. As soon as borders started closing, people started working from home. We had many teachers contact us saying that their biology and environmental courses, their fieldwork component was severely impacted. They weren't able to do it anymore, and they were after data that they could get their students to do similar kinds of analysis and learning with, without actually going in the field. And so that was interesting to develop, and I think will be hopefully really valued by the education community there. And we're wrapped up a few external projects. And so many of you will be aware about 3 or 4 years ago, our funding got really, really tight. And so we went looking for other projects that leveraged the skill set the team had. And many of those projects are coming to a close now. And so that's been nice to help continue to appreciate and keep our staff on board. But it's also, there's some skills learned from that, etc., that have been really valuable to how we do business. One of them is a significant citizen science project we've worked on. And for me particularly, this has really improved my understanding how critically valuable citizen scientists are at helping us collect field data at a spatial and temporal scale that's perhaps just not possible by professional scientists, so to speak. And the other key part of that is the value of providing the right tooling in people's hands to make that possible and easy. And so once you do that and make that easy and ensure that the data is really useful scientifically, you get really good uptake. So we've just recently, just very late last year, wrapped up this project and handed that over to the citizen scientists that run that, but learned a lot from the process. And so what does 2021 and beyond look like for us? Well, there's a lot of ongoing things, and keen to just share some of them. We've got a really busy year ahead of us. So as a response, particularly to the bushfires, and we had around, from memory, around 70 to 80 of our plots burn in the horrific fire season that was last summer. So the federal government have chipped in some money that's meant that we're able to support a second field team. So over this year, we'll operate 2 field teams, and some of the focus of those teams will be to revisit our plots that have burned to get an understanding soon after fire of what the impact was and enable them to be monitored through time. Also, as I sort of alluded to earlier, we're conducting more and more revisits as the program matures. And so that's certainly a big component to what we do, and supporting some programs of co-investment. And so two of those that we'll be doing over the next year is supporting some key infrastructure that we're developing with the co-investment help from both the Queensland government earlier in the year, and certainly the second half of the year will be spent by both teams in Western Australia, supporting some co-investment funding that the Western Australian government have thankfully chipped in to help us develop this infrastructure. So really looking forward to that. Monday last was really exciting in that we inducted 7 new staff and getting them up to speed on all their training, etc., before they really kick into action in the field at the end of the month. Data and curation and management will continue, and so there's the need to update our tech infrastructure and move to more centralized infrastructure that's managed by the data team. So we'll move our instances to that system. For those of you technically minded, in brackets, there is the technical description of that, but it means that the way we manage our data will be a more centralized and infrastructure that's able to interact with the data from right across TERN and indeed other sources as well. There's the need to ongoing maintenance for our app that collects all our data, and we'll further develop the tooling that enables us to get apps and data collection methods in the hands of proponents with our federal government project. We've got a project that we're kicking off now to look, and over a 2-year period, get UAVs to the stage that we can routinely fly them over our plots and enable us to provide UAV information to people along with the ecological information, and transfer that data to a sort of centralized repository. And there's a couple of really exciting aspects to this. The first is that I think many of you will appreciate that understanding and measuring vegetation structure in the field is a challenge, very time consuming, and particularly to do it accurately. And so this has the opportunity to particularly enhance our data collection in a structural sense, provide more accurate information, but also to collect information really rapidly. So there's the potential that this technology could be used in the future to get more rapid revisits of our site, albeit of all of our sites, albeit at a lesser detail of information. So it enables us to sort of join the dots a little bit between our less frequent field visits. We're working, as I alluded to, on a large program at the Department of Ag, Water and Environment that feeds into both the Digital Environmental Assessment Program and the Regional Land Partnerships Program, and working with our colleagues in TERN Data to make this happen, where we'll be helping to standardise a range of protocols and encouraging their uptake and well articulating what's needed there and how people would use them across a huge range of modules. And there's the second set, and then subsequently looking at what's still needed. Those vertebrate ecologists online will understand that it's a little light on in that. It's not the intent that that information isn't needed. It's the intent that we need to, with the department, make this appreciated and understanding that this is the way to approach, and then in the second tranche, ramp up some of the fauna components as well. That comes with tooling to help greater uptake. One of the key things for consultants, etc., is data management, and particularly for the department, the information comes in a very disparate way. So dealing with that from the point of collection using a progressive web app, a type of app, enables that information to all be collated and dealt with in a database sense, means that the consultant saves a significant amount of money by making their data management so much easier. But at the other end of the process too, it enables analysis and use and decision making from the department to be so much more streamlined as well. So really excited about that project that's really just starting to seriously kick off, and will continue over the next 2.5 years or so. Our R&D team, I think it's really important that we start to understand investigating the effects of different plot sizes. And so the team are just getting together now to work out how they can work out and quantify that, and then perhaps conduct some kind of experiment that helps inform what's needed at different plot sizes. And really critically too, I think maybe I've missed a slide in here, really critically as well, understand accuracy assessment. So when we collect information in the way that we do, what's the accuracy of doing it that way, and what's the sensitivity to assessing change that that enables. We're working with CSIRO and the department as well to do the training component of the MER network, so monitoring, evaluation and research, part of the RLP program, so to ensure that the data that comes in and the data collected by those RLP practitioners is able to be used in decision making and answering key research questions that will inform that program. And so that's again a project that's ongoing for the next 3 years or so, and we're involved in the training component to that, leveraging our experience in training in a range of field methods and their standardisation. Here's the slide, slightly out of order, looking at accuracy assessment of our measures and being able to quantify the accuracy of those methods for you. And that's something that will be ongoing over the next year or two as well. Working with the 3 scales of data collection, and indeed the rest of TERN as well, on doing some work on biomass across all the scales and informing on that. So again, that's something that's just beginning to kick off, but there's a range of data that we collect in the field. We use the basal wedge, we collect information on species and the amount of cover, etc. And so the information on that we can provide into that process will be really critical to help assess that and extrapolate that information out spatially. So looking forward to getting some real traction on that with the broader TERN team over the next year. We're developing a terrestrial isoscape map of Australia, so to understand the relative C3, C4 abundance across the country spatially. So that's something that's solidly in development, and the team look forward to finishing that off over the next year or so and making that spatial information also available as part of our infrastructure. We're starting to investigate the role of citizen science in TERN, and our previous WOW projects really definitely keyed me into the real niche for citizen science to help with space and time at a scale that we won't be able to do. So we have a pilot project up at Sanford to do that, aligning bird surveys with where we've established plots, involving the local community to do that, and augmented with some ecoacoustic data as well. And continue and hopefully scale up our training and workshops, and both in a formal sense, presenting to students, but presenting to practitioners to understand the rationale and et cetera behind how we collect our data and our program in a traditional sense, but also that training out in the field where you actually met with the challenges that perhaps don't occur to you in the lecture theatre. So really hoping that as vaccines become widely available, etc., we can get back to conducting many of the training exercises and workshops face to face, but also the move to online technologies like we're using today has enabled us to also contemplate delivering using sort of more virtual methods as well. So I think both of those methods will be really key parts of our tool set moving forward. That's a brief summary from me. Obviously, you will appreciate that it's a large program, and it's very hard to, in a short 40 minutes or so, to cover off on everything we do. But really happy to take some questions now, and also really happy for people to contact me offline and deal with any questions, queries, ideas for collaboration, etc. So thank you all for your time, and yeah, look forward to answering a few questions.
Thank you, Ben. It doesn't look like there are any questions in the Q&A at the moment. Oh no, here we go, we've got one here. So from Anu Siriua, sorry for the pronunciation, how can I discover information about the samples, for example, soils and plant vouchers collected? Do you offer a sample metadata catalogue?
So that information's available in AusPlots. The team put in some effort in the last update to make sure that you can access and find that information through that R tool. So that's probably the easiest and most up-to-date way to do that. But also, if you're not familiar with R, absolutely happy for you to drop us a line or come in and meet us, and we can run through how you would access that information. Absolutely.
The next question, I'm not sure who it's from, it's just a number, but they have said. Love the C3C4 map, Ben. What is it based on?
So that is based on, you saw earlier in my presentation, I talked about the work that Sam's been doing where she did a huge literature review of known isotope values and hence C3C4 pathways for species, and a significant amount of lab work to run examples of each of the species from our archive. If the photosynthetic pathway of that species was unknown, we ran it through that process so that we could then assign it to one of those pathways, and that data was critical to creating that map. Having said that, I've got an awesome R&D team that will be able to provide you the information on the details. That gets a bit beyond me to get specifically how those percentage values were arrived at. But if you drop us an email or provide your contact details in some way, and I understand, Belinda, we just saw a mobile number. Absolutely happy to put you in contact with Sam and make sure that she can answer that question far better than I can.
Okay, so a question from Arco. Are there future plans to collect subplot level data with specific and accurate locations of trees and plants, or is it the intent to always aggregate data to 1 hectare plot level?
I'm going to take a bet each way on this, Arco. The way we would deal with that is, I think our core delivery mechanism, we don't really see the way any primary need to deliver it another way other than aggregate. But I think the tooling, it would not take very much at all to alter our tooling so that you can actually know the specific locations of the trees or species in our plot. So if that information was of interest, we could have a chat offline about how we would actually make that happen. And I'd chat to the tech team about how difficult that would be to tweak with the app, but I think it's quite possible.
Okay, thanks, Ben. One more question from Megan. You mentioned you assign condition for all sites. What is this based on? I'm
not sure where I said that, so perhaps, I don't know if Megan, you're able to tweak in there a little more information, but along the process, we have done some work on condition on a NEST project a few years ago and have suggestions on how you could inform that. But given that condition is such a it's hard to describe, but condition means something different to different people, and it depends how they view the world as to how they see condition and interpret condition. So one thing we've done the whole way along is to try to not collect any specific information on condition as such, not interpreted information on condition, but to ensure we collect all those variables we think are really influential on people making calls on decision. So more the raw data than any sort of synthesis of condition, meaning that people that are interested in condition can then look at our data and interpret that based on their need and their meaning of condition to make our data relevant to them. So hopefully that's dealt with that a little bit. Sorry. So yeah, okay, I get what you're talking about. So that is for this project that we're working on in the next few years, and that is to work with the Department of Agriculture, Water, Environment, etc., to come up with a condition protocol. So yes, we've have a draft of that from the past, and we're looking at how we can do that to enable practitioners to collect some interpreted information of condition in the field. But let's be clear, not underestimating the challenge that task will provide. And undoubtedly, part of that question will be, or part of the solution there will be making it very clear our definition of condition when we do that.
Any final questions from anyone?
If there are no more questions, but something occurs to you after the fact, please drop us a line. This infrastructure is here for you to use and to help you achieve your goals and research. So if there's anything we can do to help, we'd love to help out and enable our data and samples to be more widely used. So yeah, feel free to get in contact.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. It's been lovely to have you here with us and to let you know what we've been up to and what we're planning. We really look forward to working with you this year and hope you have a lovely day. We'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.